Good morning, everybody, and welcome to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Drive safe, Dave here. Doing it solo a little bit, except I do have Blake. Sorry, Blake, I didn't want to throw you out there. You are here with me. We got the producer man on the board, but Sir Rick is on assignment out there trying to make the wheels turn, get them moving for the show. Not only for the show to make it a little bit better, but a little bit more exciting for you, I assure you. The only thing you're going to miss is us not going at each other today, and you're probably going to feel a little left out, like there's something, it's like a big piece is missing. And I'm going to tell you, it is the angst between Sir Rick and Drive Safe Dave. That's truly what you're missing. But I'll tell you what, we got a great show for you today. Number one, we got Zach Miller going to come on here in a little bit and going to discuss to us a little bit about the city. And the urban policy and the urban ideology about having trucks in these urban areas. It's an interesting discussion, and I like it because Zach is an advocate for trucks. And I think it's important that we hear exactly what he has to say in that regard. I did want to mention that it was compelling that yesterday, there was a day before yesterday, an article came out late. I didn't get a chance to bring it up yesterday, but two members of the Senate Committee on Highway Policy raised concerns about inadequate parking for the nation's truckers during a recent hearing about supply chain connectivity. Now, Senator Johnson Boozman of Arkansas and Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming nominee to lead the Federal Highway Administration on the commerce parking issue. And they said for years, lawmakers and stakeholders have sounded the alarm and nothing's really being done. And I think, you know what? We're talking about it. They're talking about it in the news. They're bringing it up. I'm ready for some solutions. Genuinely, I think as an industry, the trucking industry, the trucking people, the truck drivers, the businesses out there, the receivers, the shippers, everybody out there understands the need for truck parking. And if you don't know what I mean, is that it takes forever. Sometimes it takes 2 and 3 hours just for a truck driver to find a place to park. Now, I know that that seems crazy, but it does, and it affects their productivity. It puts them out there on the road, and it makes them out there during a time in which they should be trying to easily finding a place to park and feel safe. Look, we can say, hey, we're going to have truck drivers out there, they can just park anywhere, but really what they need is they need to be able to feel safe and secure wherever they park. And it needs to be, and they need to have, they need to be able to get to facilities, and it is necessary if we want our supply chain to increase its efficiency. This has been an ongoing issue. I think truck parking set out was one of the #1 issues by truck drivers across the country, and that's up there with pay, that's up there with safety, that's up there with home time. That's so far up there that they're going, hey, we need help and we need a place to park. So I'm glad that a couple of senators promote truck parking. However, I'm tired of the talk. I want to see some action. I want to see our federal government do something about it. I want them, if either of these senators are your senators, I think it's a pretty good time to give them a call and let them know, hey, it's time. You know, you brought it up, you're promoting it. What are you doing about it? Where's the bill being passed in order to make it happen? Where is it on the floor getting voted on so that we can provide parking for trucks? Because it's a danger, it's unsafe, it's unfair. And I mean what I mean by that, it's you're going to your job. If I had to tell you, hey, you come to your job and when you get here, make sure you spend the first couple of hours just looking for a place to park, and then I'll pay you. And then I'll start paying you. That's not fair. And that's what we're talking about here. Because the driver gets paid by the miles they run under the load, not by the miles they get when they're trying to find a place to park. And it's just inefficient. It's unsafe. And when you drive that way and you make that way and you talk that way to a driver and you make it more difficult for them to do their job, then what you do is you make it more accessible to being unsafe. And when you start, if you want people to be taken care of and you want the roads better and the highways better, you got to think of a very important way, and that's to find truck parking for our drivers. The only other topic that I wanted to talk about is that this article also came out, and is the court ruled against the Rhode Island's truck-only toll program. Why should trucks be the only ones paying to put the bridges up? Everybody's going to use them. Everybody should pay them. And in fact, the court said that there's no reason that the interest cannot be served by a tolling system that does not offend just the commerce, because roadworks fails to properly apportion the tolls for all bridge users. So you can't just toll just trucks to pay for everything. Why wouldn't you toll everyone that uses the bridge? Why would you want to just do it to the commerce? And awesome, and that the American Trucking Association led that charge against the program and sued the program that was enacted in 2018. Very awesome deal there. Let's make it fair for everybody across the board. And I think that's truly true. All right. With that, we're going to come back in just a second. When we come back, we're going to talk to Zach Miller. We'll bring him on as soon as we come back, and me and him, and we'll just talk a little bit about urban truck safety. All right, we'll be back in just a second.
You're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. BCB Live covers freight. Here we are now at 21% of record freight being rejected. News down in Texas. We're going to talk a little bit about this. We had another $1.5 million seizure. If ever there's a time to do a pre or post trip, it's if you're doing something wrong. Weather, traffic.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to some traffic and weather with Buckle Up Bob. You can kind of see where the visibility can be compromised a little bit. Again, right where that rain is.
And most importantly, safety.
One of the things that we must do is make sure that safety is the number one thing that we focus on.
Going into an intersection yellow is not the way. That's to clear an intersection, not to enter an intersection.
Tune in weekdays from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. You can watch BCB Live through LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe today and follow BCB Live.
All right, and we are back. Drive Safe Dave here, back on BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. And I have with us a great guest here, Zach Miller, head of Stream. Why don't you tell us what Stream is?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for having me, and just everything you said at the open about truck parking and the ridiculousness of the Rhode Island only tolling scheme is just spot on. So I'm really excited to be here. TruckTractorTrailer.com is a two-sided marketplace where buyers and sellers can list their used trucks and trailers. We really designed it to serve the owner-operator, to be a one-stop shop for that owner-operator. But with the pandemic, with some of the changes we've actually seen more small and mid-sized, both fleets and dealers, utilize both sides of the platform, a lot of listings on the website, and then some of them using us to purchase as well, given the OEM supply chain problems. So Stream is the in-house media channel of TruckTractorTrailer.com. So that's where we have guests, we discuss news and views. It's a little bit of education, a little bit of entertainment. I like to say on Stream, a pun is always intended. And you can check us out on YouTube. That's Stream with 3 T's.
So, and I'm, yeah, absolutely. And go on and look for them, find out about Stream. But really, I think what I wanted to talk to you about, Dak, today was, here it is, and this is my favorite. You currently live in the big city of New York, right? Mm-hmm. And you are an advocate for drivers in the city. I mean,
absolutely.
To me, that's a small niche. I mean, right? Would you agree? That's a pretty small niche in the city.
It's a conference of one, I would say, but seriously, it is small, which is actually absurd, because in New York City, about 90% of freight comes via truck. So we know that the majority of freight in this nation comes via truck, but in New York City, it's even higher. I mean, it's as close to 100% by truck as I think is actually possible to get, because you'd never get 100% of anything in this world. So the fact that this city needs trucks to literally survive. And we just saw it during the pandemic, the absolute worst of it. The trucks were essential. They were treated as essential workers. They delivered everything that we needed. They completely shifted deliveries to homes and residential areas away from, the major commercial corridors. And yet, despite all that, despite the fact that there are so many vehicles on the road in New York City in limited space, there are so many different road users, so that includes cyclists and pedestrians and, public transit buses and all that. There are very limited incidents revolving trucks. Now, they do happen, and when they happen, they do cause a lot of damage, and obviously that's something we'll speak to a little bit later in the show. But generally speaking, but considering the amount of freight trips daily, considering the amount of road users that truck drivers have to compete with, it is such an incredibly safe industry. They operate so safely, and yet they are vilified. They are treated like the bad guy, like some sort of like crazy movie villain. And I can't understand it. And it's just, if you hate trucks so much, stop buying things. Stop transacting. Go live in the wood. Go live in the woods. Be naked. Be starving and live in the woods. And you don't need a truck. And that's great. And that's fair. But if you don't want to do that, if you do want to live in our modern society, if you do want to live in a major urban center like New York City, then you have to understand that a big part of commerce is going to be via trucking. And so instead of being a bomb thrower and painting the industry in a bad light, why don't you work together with the industry? The industry is always willing to come to the table, always willing to throw ideas around. And we could have really positive dialogues and try to come up with some safety measures and possibly some new modes of transportation that will work for everybody. But as long as the truck drivers and the industry as a whole is vilified to the extent that it is, I will always be on the opposite end, fighting for the truckers, fighting for this industry, and fighting for commerce, really, at the end of the day. That's what it's about.
I agree with you 100%, especially in regards to the city. Most of the time, trucks, especially in that environment, it's already closed up. You become an obstacle. You become something in the way. You're either going too slow or you can't. I got to get around you. I can't see around you. And then you become something that makes it difficult for your day to be better. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why, because typically trucks are just, because if I have to stop, back into a hole, and I got to block traffic, and I got it so I can unload the groceries that y'all need, you become this monster that you can't really push out of your way. I think sometimes people like to bully in the cities, like they honk. You're not really bullying a big truck, right? I mean, seriously, you're not going to do that. But I think it's important that both driver of the big truck and the other person on the other street user understand that this is a partnership out there on the road. And I don't care if you're walking, I don't care if you're riding a bicycle, you're driving a cab. We're all partners using the same road. And if we don't respect one another, the bad things are going to ultimately happen to you. I mean, they will happen.
Completely. I completely agree. And that's something that, look, as you say, the truck, it's the bigger vehicle. It's the more powerful vehicle. The driver behind it is a trained, licensed professional. So the burden, for lack of a better word, of safety is always going to be greater on them, always. That being said, everybody does have to take a little bit of responsibility for their own safety. And the best way to do that is to understand where the truck is coming from, to understand the blind spots, to understand the turning radius, to understand that, if you can't make eye contact with the driver, assume they can't make contact with you. And understand what it takes to be a pedestrian around a large vehicle, to be a cyclist around a large vehicle, just as that driver needs to understand what it takes to be a driver around a pedestrian, to be a driver around a cyclist, to drive in a dense urban setting, very different from the open road highways. The driver needs to know that and understand that, and so too does the cyclist and pedestrian. And through that dialogue, through that mutual understanding and respect, we will really see an improvement in safety numbers and more livable streets here in these cities. And I think just better dialogue and better better free flow of ideas, of commerce, of everything. And where I get so angry is that sort of education and outreach is sort of prevented here in New York City. The messaging has to be tough against trucks about how they're the only ones with responsibility. They're the only ones who everything enforcement needs to be against them. Roads need to be designed against them. And the more that message is out there, putting aside the trucks for a second, that kind of gives complacency to pedestrians and to cyclists to make it even harder for them to recognize things like blind spots and turning radiuses and making eye contact with the driver. And, I can tell you, for me, I am a pedestrian. That's what I do. I do not have a car. I do not like biking. I've never felt comfortable on a bicycle. When I need to get around the city, I do it on using my own 2 feet. And just working with the trucking industry has made me such a better pedestrian. It's like night and day. And I could be aggressive as a pedestrian, like all native New Yorkers are,
Y'all can be. Yeah.
Jaywalking is a way of life here.
Yeah.
To be honest. But and I do it. I jaywalk just like every other New Yorker. And guess what? I do it with an understanding and a respect of larger vehicles. And it has made me a better pedestrian and a safer pedestrian. And if there was more of that, we would live in a much safer city.
I look, we can split this off in many directions. Number one, I think sometimes people think because they're pedestrians and walking, they can stare at their phones and be oblivious to those things that's going around them. They can be distracted walking. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't allow the driver behind the 18-wheeler driver be distracted with his cell phone and allow that or we tolerate that. But to walk and be distracted in a crosswalk, how is that any better in a social setting in an urban area? How is jaywalking, staring at your phone, ever a good idea?
It's not. And putting aside the actual walking in the middle of the street, I mean, you could imagine how many people I see. They'll just walk into a pole. They'll walk into a light pole. They'll walk into another person because they're looking at their phone. And I do think, you raise a great point, because I do think some of the terms we use for drivers, we should also apply to pedestrian. Like when I talked about my becoming a better pedestrian, I look at it as defensive walking, as a defensive
100%.
pedestrian.
100%.
It's the same thing. Distracted driving, thankfully we're making some changes to it, but distracted driving is a curse on this nation. It has ruined lives. It ruins lives by the day. We could even have a whole conversation about, what the telecoms and apps liabilities need to be, because it really is a curse. But it's the same thing. You can be a distracted pedestrian. Of course you can. We've all done it. We've all seen it. So, instead of siloing all these road users, we need to break down those walls. We need to look at everybody as a necessary and engaged stakeholder, and we need to be speaking the same language. And that goes to the responsibility. You have a responsibility when you're walking not to be looking at your phone, just like you have a responsibility when you're driving not to be looking at your phone. It sounds simple, and yet it's incredibly complicated.
It is complicated, and I think that's one of the reasons why we here at BCB continue to educate and talk about these things about safety, because even the pedestrian walking, they are responsible for their own personal safety. I mean, ultimately, we each of us are responsible, but I don't like that. I think we're responsible for safety. I think safety is everybody's business. It's everybody's responsibility, and you know what? Ultimately, I am responsible for other people's safety all the time. And drivers ultimately in a truck realize that, being a professional driver, because when has it not been the truck driver's fault whenever there's an accident, right? Because he's the trained professional. How is he in an accident and it not be his fault, right? I mean, but I truly believe that safety, number one, if you care about yourself or other people, that is fundamentally the first principle behind safety, right? Because you want to make sure other people don't get hurt, or you want to make sure you don't get hurt. I mean, that's what it is. And when you talk about engaging these people, I think we have to find a core value with them, a principle with them that spurs them to want to do that. Children are great at reacting and learning and educating because they're like sponges. They do soak up, but they're the first to run out in the street after a ball. So you got to be, I mean, you got to be careful. But I think education is important. How hard is it, and you mentioned it, to get people engaged in education when it comes to that kind of stuff?
It is. It's funny you mentioned the kids being able to soak it up because as we all know, kids love trucks because it's trucks, dinosaurs, and superheroes. The three things that kids love, and so there are events. There are events where you could touch a truck, where you could get behind the wheel, where you could walk around and you talk to the driver or a driver of the truck, and the kids kind of get it. They kind of get it. They understand. They know one of the things that they love about trucks is how big they are to begin with. So there's an understanding there. I think what happens is as the person sort of gets older, that starts to shift a little bit. I think there's a lot. The negative media coverage definitely doesn't help anything. I think a lot of the political rhetoric doesn't help anything. And I think that's sort of what happens is there's so much negativity that chips away at that person as they get a little bit older, as they, become an adult and start really forming their own opinions, that all of a sudden that whole, hey, safety is everyone's responsibility. And the driver needs to make sure I get home safely. And I need to make sure the driver gets home safely.
Correct.
Without, not getting arrested or ruining their life. So it's just like there's common ground there, or at least there ought to be. And so it becomes, I think, instead of talking over each other or at each other, we just need to talk with each other and just say, and I think the blind spot is the perfect one. You say, listen, it's there. I didn't design the vehicle. I didn't do it. I operate it as safely as I possibly can. This is a blind spot. Just please, there's you want to go to war with an OEM, be my guest. But for right now, this is how the vehicle is designed.
Absolutely.
Please do not walk or ride there. Please.
Yeah, because
at the bare minimum, do that. Yeah,
I
can't see you.
And I'll tell you, and we mentioned this earlier in the pre-meeting. I've driven, and many drivers would agree with me. You go to these cities, and New York's an older city, and I don't care if it's Philly or New York or if it's Boston. I don't care. Some of the difficulties is these cities weren't designed for the size of trailers that we have out there today. They just weren't. They weren't designed for big 53s to swing a corner and to go in these areas. And you and I both know there's a lot of bridges that you just can't clear. They're low, and then the driver, if you're not familiar with the area, then shame on you. You know what I mean? Because now you're really the bad guy. But how hard is it to get infrastructure built and designed to help out with this stuff? Because I assure you that there are many bridges in areas that are really dilapidated and really dangerous in your city alone. I know several highways that should be absolutely fixed because they have large trucks running on them, and they really shouldn't be. Do you agree?
I totally agree. In fact, and that's where I'm going to go with that, because there's a major freight corridor in the whole Northeast, but it runs through New York City, which is the BQE, the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. That highway is falling apart. And it needs to be redone. And this is sort of where we run into problems in terms of New York City infrastructure, because there is a vocal group in New York and in a lot of urban areas that want highways completely eliminated. They want to go back to some of the racial history of highways, but also they really want to go back to the fact that they are anti-vehicle, any vehicle. So when you explain that this is a major freight corridor, they don't care. They think you could just shift freight to rail or to bark. Yeah, at which it's not like the railroads almost shut down the country 2 weeks ago. It's not. But sure, let's blame the trucks for the fact that we only have 2 rail companies in the whole nation. But this is the mentality we have to work with. So we were there was a large coalition of elected officials and community groups and business groups to get the funding to repair the BQE, to make sure that highway stayed that major freight corridor, and it was shot down by some loud local groups that want to turn it into a park or to some other sort of,
You know how necessary the BQE is? Do you know how necessary?
It's
I'm
the
just saying,
lifeblood.
do what now?
It's the lifeblood of the city, of the economy.
I don't, what would you do without it? I mean, but I'm going to tell you that I believe if you don't invest in it now, it won't be long before something tragic happens in that, because the alarm bells are already going off. Everyone knows that it is necessary to change it, and we're not fixing it. I mean, how do we not fix it?
It's mind-boggling. They're doing some like Scotch tape type repairs, really, for lack of a better word, just to make sure it doesn't completely crumble until they could figure out what they want it to look like. But what it needs to look like, and I'm sure there are other. They could have it with freight and with something else. Doesn't necessarily just have to be, trucks, but they have to have that corridor for trucks to go down. And to the point is, like you said, there are so many roads and bridges and communities already where trucks can't really fit through. But imagine diverting all of them off the BQE onto these local streets.
I can't.
Epic disaster.
And
that's what the understanding needs to be, and that's where the investments need. And then I think we could also have a conversation about places where you could do like micro distribution zones, where you could come up with ways to move freight from larger vehicles to smaller vehicles, possibly even cargo bikes, electric vans. There are opportunities there, but you have to be willing to meet with the industry at the table and talk through them, or else they're never going to happen, and everything is just going to get worse and worse and worse and less safe.
Well, what we don't need to have is a disaster, and because the alarm bells are out there, and I think what we're talking about, and I know the infrastructure bill was put out there, and I know that we've invested some money across the country, and if we hadn't, we would be in a much worse place than we are now. But I think not just the BQE is a good example of what we're talking about here. There's many things that we need to discuss if we wanted to, or go down that rabbit hole about how important it is when we do invest in our infrastructure that we think about trucks. I mean, we need to think about all of them. Look, most people don't realize the interstate system in the United States wasn't created for the four-wheel passenger car. It was actually created for interstate commerce. It was actually created to move goods and services across this country by, Dwight D. Eisenhower saw the need of being able for the defense, not only for the growth of the country, but for the defense of the country and for the ability to do that. And that was created, and it's turned into this, the interstate system is pretty awesome across the country. It's pretty effective. But we need to rethink and retool. I like the idea of sitting down with businesses and coming up with these micro centers. That's a discussion that business can succeed in. But if you're not willing to come to the table and just say, get rid of us as a whole, it won't work. I mean, it just won't work. I mean, and you don't want those trucks running by your schools constantly all day long like they do out in LA at the port, trying to get those, you know what I mean? We have those kinds of situations, and it's not beneficial to the public as a whole. I'll tell you what, it says here that you have gone to City Hall and testified. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So, anytime that there's a bill that, generally it's through the Transportation Committee at the City Council, but there's a bill that's going to affect trucking, good, bad, or otherwise. The Trucking Association of New York comments, and I've been actively involved with that organization for a long time. I served on the board the last 4 years. I actually ran the Metro Region Legislative Affairs Committee for the last 6 years. So that's what I go to the City Council to talk about. And the most recent one was sort of what you were saying, where business takes the lead, but because the regulatory agencies operate a little slowly, the City Council wanted to give them a push. So the City Council really came up with this package of bills that would, for example, explore those micro distribution zones that would sort of mandate that any new apartment building that goes up, that they have a dedicated space, for package delivery. Because of the rise of e-commerce, that on the street, anytime a building is go up and they take away a commercial loading zone, that during the construction, they must find a way to replace that loading zone. And so those were some of the more positive bills that the city council looked to pass. Now, there are some negative ones that I had to testify in as well, things like, regulating side guards on every truck in the city. And of course, on the one hand, that's the thing, right? On the one hand, you say, well, it's a safety issue. And you say, but the city doesn't really have the jurisdiction to regulate it to the point where it would have any sort of safety impact. That's just an economic impact. If anything's going to be mandated in that way, it has to come at the federal level. New York City has no business just doing that. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you can see some of the fun I have at these city council meetings.
I'll tell you what, I do like the fact that you're an advocate and that you work with the Trucking Association. I think it's fantastic. I think anybody that's listening should be involved. If you're in this industry, you should be involved in your association. You should be involved at the local level, at the state level, or wherever you can get in. Absolutely. And as you speak to it, it's important that we all create that voice out there. Hey, Zach, look, man, I appreciate it. Why don't you tell us again about your site, what they can listen to, and how can they hear you?
So you could listen to me on Stream, which is YouTube. My name is Zach Miller. I am with TruckTractorTrailer.com, and you are listening to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
Wow, I didn't even have to prompt you, and you did it all the way through. That is awesome, Zach. Hey, listen, I'd love to have you back on to talk about some other fun and important stuff as safety. I appreciate you being on here, man. Great conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend, sir.
Absolutely. You too, and I'm looking forward to coming back.
All right, thanks a lot. We'll see you later.
Thanks.
All right, well, that was Zach Miller with Stream, and I'll tell you what a fun conversation. We talk about different things. We talk about a lot of different issues and stuff we got going on in this country. And yes, the big cities are one of them that tractor trailers have to move in, move around, and move through with safety and be there and be mindful of it. And what a great conversation. I appreciate Zach for coming on. We'll be back in just a second with Double Check Dale and discussing a little bit about a safety topic that I think all of us find very important. We'll be back in just 1 minute. And we're back here at BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Drive safe, Dave. And along with Double Check Dale, back in the studio. What you got going on today over there, Dale? Hey, no, before we get started, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to start this off. Is that okay?
That's fine, Dave. Start.
Are you okay? Because I think this is important. We talk about safety here, and we talk about all kinds of things, and we talk about distracted driving, and we talk about what they are. But I'm going to tell you, to me, I think one of the things about truck driving that's important that we realize is how impactful stress is on our lives. And I mean that in a sense that we talked about it earlier, and life gets in the way.
Yep, life happens.
Life happens to everybody.
Every moment, every day.
Every moment of every day. I agree with you 100%. And it is easy to be distracted behind the wheel. And I'll start with something very simple. I'm a driver. I've been out for 2 weeks. I'm on my last load going home. Yep. Am I going a little bit faster than I would normally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Yep.
Because I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to be a little bit. I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing for the next 3 days that I get.
My mind is racing, and I've sped up a little.
And I've pushed the accelerator down a little bit. Or here's one that's happened to me in the past. I'm on the road and I just headed out and I'm in Atlanta and my wife calls and the pipes are leaking. We got leaking pipes. What is she calls me on the phone? She's in panic mode. What does she do? You know, I'm not there to grab the pipe wrench and turn a wrench. I'm not there to turn the water valve off. I'm not there to fix it. And now all of a sudden I'm stressed a little bit, right? I'm freaked a little bit because of the things that's going on. I'm worried that she's now in a bad position to deal with this, and I'm not there. How is that going to affect how I drive?
Oh, very much so, because it takes you away from focusing on your primary mission of driving safely, and now your mind is wandering. You're thinking of all the different things that can go wrong, that can go bad in that. And so, I mean, it's very tough, like you said. It's so easy to get distracted with that other things. The hard part is to bring yourself back into the reality of what's going on around you, watching those mirrors, getting that big picture, driving defensively. It's very real.
It is real. It's kind of scary in and of itself because it can make a difference between being safe today and not being safe today. Here's the hard part. It's not dealing with the problems in life.
No.
It's knowing when you should not be driving the truck, or knowing when you should slow down, or knowing when that this is negatively impacting your decision making.
Yeah.
Because you're not making the best decisions out there. And what I mean by that is in the lane you're in, behind the vehicle you're behind, or out there on the road, doing what you're doing that you do so much that the other person takes over, and you're focused on that and not focused on where you should be.
Yeah, you start justifying the decisions you're making because, well, I got this going on there, so I'm going to drive a little bit faster going home, knowing that you normally wouldn't. Now you're justifying it because, well, I have this. Well, there's always something going on. You can't start justifying that way. You have to recognize that, hey, I'm making decisions that I shouldn't be making, that I normally wouldn't be making, and pull back from them.
Yeah, I tell you right now, it's very tough to be honest with yourself. That's the hardest part. No, I'm okay. I got this. I'm good. I know. I'll hang on just a second. Hang on. Let me get through this traffic just a second. I'll call you right back. No. What's got going on? I'll call the plumber. No, I know the guy. I'll call it. You know what I mean? You got all these things going on, and you're still behind the wheel of the car.
Yeah, and things have changed so much. I mean, you just said, well, no, I'll make the call. Back in the day when I was driving, probably you too, the cell phones weren't there. So you got that call from your wife that says, hey, I got this going on. The worst you could do is sit there in the vehicle and stew over and think about it. But you didn't start, picking your phone up. You didn't start looking for, plumbers or whatever else. And that's the real danger, is because today now you have so much other things at your fingertips, so many other ways to get distracted.
Searching for the plumber on your phone. No, and look, I get it. There's other things in life that also deal with it. There's, I got to get home because my son's got a game.
Yeah.
I want to make the game. And herein lies the difficulty. And I bring this up because I want to make sure that we speak to it. This has everything to do with dispatchers. This has everything to do with owners. This has everything to do with everyone in this industry. Find a way, these stressors, these moments, these danger times, to be able to communicate and listen to the drivers, understand where they are. And if the driver's out there and you understand where you are, make sure that you realize that's the moment you need to back off. That's the moment you need to slow down. That's the moment it gets dangerous. And this is the time. I would much rather you be there than trying to be early and not making it at all. And I think that's where we are. And I think that's where we have to be mentally. We have to be prepared to slow down. We have to look at life for what it is. It is tough. And we are people. And behind the wheel of these trucks, we are human. We are infallible. We do make mistakes. We make less of them, though, when we're focused on what we're doing.
Yeah. When we're being honest with ourselves, focused on what we're doing, being honest with ourselves, thinking it through, knowing that, hey, this is going on, but I still can't take those risks. I can't change what's important to me, the value of life, because once we start making changes and decisions about getting home instead of the value of life, that's when they really go downhill bad, and they start to snowball.
They do, and we talk about it and we mention it, and I think it's so hard to be honest with, and I'm going to be. It's hard to be honest with me.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, you can be honest with me a whole lot easier than I'll be honest with me.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell myself I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I'll tell myself that I got this.
I'll look in the mirror. I can do this.
I got this.
I got
I'm
this.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, we've got to make sure that we understand the most important thing you're doing at the time when you're behind the wheel of the vehicle is concentrating on what you're doing behind the wheel of the vehicle. Whether you're, I don't care. I mean, it really, I don't care while you're behind the vehicle. You've got to focus there.
Yeah.
And if you need to pull over for a minute, pull over. Pull over, make your calls, get done what needs to get done, and then get back out on the road. And if you're late, have people understand why you're late. Explain it, get into detail. Those are the kinds of things that are important. All right, do we have any videos? Let's look at these 3 videos.
Let's look at 3 videos today. Hey, guess what? We're probably following too close right here.
You know what? You're going to catch yourself in these moments, right? You're going to be driving down the road, and guess what? You're behind the slow vehicle, right? It's going so slow that the people on the right are passing on the right. Yeah, I mean, it's just that's where the driver got himself so that he didn't have, you know, the ingress, egress of that right lane, and he's riding there just taking it easy.
Yep.
You got to get around him. All right. Now, here's one of those scenes that you come up on. Nobody's going anywhere. We're moving very slowly through here. Don't get up in it. Don't get in the pack, and don't find yourself caught up in this mess, because that can get ugly quick.
Yes, it will. And you look at the vehicles that are involved with a truck pulling a trailer, which, you know, they don't have the experience that the professional drivers do.
Oh, the snowbird here on the right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen that make this situation even a little bit more dangerous when you get caught up, like you said, in that pack. And again, just a little too close, and I actually think this one driver gains a little bit on the one in front
Yeah,
of him.
he's trying to get up in there, and you're trying to get close in. Look, he wants to pass those vehicles on the right, or she, I don't know exactly which, but I think for sending this in. This is just seeing our everyday stuff. It's something that we get used to, something that we see, and I'll tell you right now, this moment in time, we're going to see this 500 times a day out there almost every mile you run. You're going to see those little...
Yep.
Those little packs but steer clear of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you have to be honest with yourself and say, hey, I am too close, and yeah, I know why. It goes back to justifying. I know why I'm too close.
Right.
I am too close, but I got to back out of it, make this safer. So.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think it is important that you identify, and you know what? We watch these videos. The drivers weren't really doing anything wrong other than following too close at the time. And if you wanted to look at it even more, believe this, it can be viewed as aggressive driving because we were tailgating.
Yep.
We weren't following at a safe distance, and that's really the definition of tailgating. So we just want you to back off. We want you to get to the safe distance, and we want you to be safe out there on the road.
Yep. And just because you're at or below the speed limit doesn't make it right. You're still following too close, like you said. I mean, speed and space management, they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, let's have a safe and wonderful weekend. We will see y'all on Monday here on BCB Live.
Safest station in the nation.
He knows it every time. All right, we'll be back.
Peace out.
Bye.